I'm Tom Ricks, and we're back with FPTV. Welcome aboard. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Tom.
To begin with, what do you think is the most overlooked news story of the last year?
Well, just to be parochial here, I think the fact that China is not just going to become the world's most dominant power, but the fact that it probably already has become the world's most dominant power is perhaps one of the big stories of our time.
How worried are you by Chinese off-the-books debt?
Well, I think they do have a lot of off-the-books debt, but the key question is whether, even if they get into trouble, whether they have the ability to bounce back, whether the economy is resilient enough to bounce back from all the problems that they have, including the fact that they have lots of off-book debt and so on. So, and I do think that they have the ability, they have fiscal ability. Unlike us, we're constrained in terms of what we can do, but China's debt is still very low, and they have the political will to bounce back from any crisis that they might suffer.
So you don't think each province of China is a little Greece waiting to blow up?
No. I mean, not at all, because unlike Greece, they are backed by a very strong center and a center committed to the provinces. Unlike the ECB, for example.
So they're better capitalists than Greece?
Exactly, absolutely,
okay.
Yeah.
So you think China will have a soft landing over the next year if it has some slowdown in its growth?
Right. No, I don't necessarily think that it'll have a soft landing, but I do think that even if it has a slightly hard landing over the next couple of years, it will have the resilience to take off after that hard landing. Mm-hmm. It won't crash.
Okay. Best idea of the year?
Best idea of the year, I do think is that, we need to strategically empower China to give it a greater stake so that the open economic system that the United States bequeathed after World War II, that China has a stake in perpetuating that system and not undermining that.
Worst idea of the year?
The worst idea of the year is, I think, the notion in the United States that government is the problem. I think, to me, as an outsider, one of the really bizarre things about the United States is the following. I can understand that, this is a country that believed in freedom and minimal government. But how is it that after the financial crisis, which was demonstrably a result of private sector excesses, demonstrably a result of inadequate government regulation, how is it that we come out of this with a narrative that the government is the problem? And this is one of the really, bad ideas that have come out after the crisis.
I would say it's because the wealthy have a disproportionate voice in American politics.
Well, but it's not obvious that, the wealthy might be very influential, but why don't, the 99% of Americans, show up and say, that's not right, we need government to deliver kind of basic things for us, which has been the strength of the US economy, and society over the last hundreds of years.
And how would you answer that very good question? Why don't the 99% wake up?
Well, part of it is what you just said, that the political process is influenced perhaps disproportionately by the people who have a lot of money and power. But I think that still doesn't absolve people from, they still have the ability to speak with their voice. And in some ways, I think the Occupy Wall Street movement is partially a reflection of, people wanting to reassert themselves and claim this narrative for themselves.
Do you think the majority of the 100 big thinkers, of which you're a member, are basically Occupy Wall Street supporters?
I would bet that 90% of those, would be Occupy Wall Street supporters.
I think you're probably right. And finally, novel you'd recommend or movie you would recommend?
So I think one of the best books I've read over the last several years is a book called Why the West Rules for Now by Ian Morris. It's a successor to the great Jared Diamond book, Guns, Germs and Steel, except that this is even more ambitious. Jared Diamond begins at 13,000 BC. I think Ian Morris begins at 1.3 million years BC and goes forward to 2200 AD. So it's a kind of a history of everything. And from my own point of view, the interesting thing is that what he says is that, for the last, for about 1,000 years between 500 AD and 1500 AD, China ruled the world. So Chinese view the last 200-300 years as an aberration from that long-term trend, and that they think that it's their rightful due to rule the world.
I think you're absolutely right on that. Finally, novel or film?
Yeah, novel. The novel I've read recently, which I've really liked a lot, is To the End of the Land by David Grossman. I think it's a great example of how a man can actually write like a woman and express very feminine ideas, and including how can he think about children like a woman can think about children. So I think that's really of course, setting it in the larger context of the Israel-Palestine dispute and so on. So it's a great book.
And the film?
Film, I liked. I forget the. Gods. It's called Dieu et Homme. I think Gods and Men. It's about
Algeria.
The Algerian film. Yeah, exactly. It's about a bunch. These monks who live in Algeria and how they deal with progressive. The Islamicization of their society, and how they deal with it with a sense of calm and equanimity. I think it's a great.
And had a very moving last scene.
Exactly. It's a very, very moving last scene. Exactly.
And that was our last scene.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.